NGO and civil society organization that works to defend the rights of people worldwide. We strive to achieve our goal on advocating for the respect of basic human rights by empowering people and spreading awareness. As we embark on the 47th regular session of the United Nations Human Rights Council, UHRC has been working hard to gather information and explore one of many issues which we will be speaking about today: Hindutva hatred in India during the current COVID-19 pandemic, with a view to urge the international community to take immediate corrective action. For those who may not know, Hindutva is a form of Hindu nationalism, which is defined by the state or quality of being Hindu. It is a way to bring together Indian culture, creating a link between Hindus and the Hindu way of life. And today, it has become apparent that anti-Hindu sentiment, or Hinduphobia, has had a strong negative impact on its people, notably women and children. With the current standards put in place by the state, the justice and political system in India has a significant number of barriers, resulting in neglect towards its people, who have faced the consequences with crimes, for example, of sexual assault, child labor, and much more. On that note, I would like to introduce myself. I am Megan Severak, and I am the moderator of today's side event. I would like to thank our guest speakers and for their presence, as well as our viewers. I am pleased to introduce our speakers, who are three accomplished human rights activists. We have Ms. Sonia Noor, Faculty of Law at the University of Geneva, Ms. Hina Yuna, Director of International Affairs, and Dr. Feroz Messenger, Clinical Director for Primary Care SAS and Secretary General of UHRC. I remind our guests that you have 15 minutes to each to express yourself on the matter at hand. And for our viewers, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to leave a comment in the discussion box that you can find by clicking on the icon at the bottom of the screen. Your questions will be taken into consideration once all of our speakers have said their parts. Once again, I welcome you all. I now give the floor to our first speaker, Ms. Sonia Noor.
Thank you, Megan. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, it's an honor to be here today with you, with such a great organization as UHRC. The tension between Muslims and Hindus of India is a matter that has existed since the 14th century. In other words, conflict between those two communities isn't something which is new. It means also that there hasn't been yet a reaction of the international community and that there hasn't been yet a solution. As the time goes by, the tensions evolved and became more and more stronger. Nowadays, we can tell that those tensions are not anymore only misunderstandings. We can see hatred. It became something that we cannot control anymore. And it became a situation that the international community needs to be aware of. The hatred isn't something that happens overnight. You have to build it during a certain amount of time. The more you invest in, and the more it will grow bigger. There must be a strong desire to create it and develop it. But why? A community as the Hindus community would try to take down and eradicate a minority as the Muslims community. And the answer is quite easy. That's all because of the fear. The fear of the other one taking the power. And all this hatred towards Muslims is built with fear. Fear is an irrational feeling that Hindus try to make logical, rational. But the fear of the other one threatening, is only a matter of political interest. That fear has a name. It's called Islamophobia. And that fear increased during the crisis of the COVID-19. COVID-19 was and is nowadays a huge challenge for India, more than ever. However, this crisis hides another one from the international community. In India, the COVID-19 increased hate, especially towards Muslims, and it has to be stopped. I mean, the crisis hides this hate towards Muslims on an international level, and that we have to show that now. We have to show the truth that what is going on internally. The Hindus community used the crisis to lead disinformation campaigns, saying that Muslims spread more the virus or that the virus would seem more dangerous if it's a Muslim that would have it. And other examples too, like the Hindus community used the crisis to discriminate Muslims even more by not allowing them to enter the hospitals when they were in the need. Another fact is it became common to observe physical, verbal violences towards Muslims in the streets, or even to hear hate speeches from Hindu leaders. Usually, hate speeches are spread by community leaders. It means that by their class and by their position in the community, they have all the power and the control over their own community or family. The biggest is the family or the community. The quickest the hate spreads, and the quicker the hate grows. And these leaders tend to ensure that the hate and the fear that they teach to their relatives becomes usual. The more they express their hate towards Muslims, the more the hate will become normal. And that's why they're trying to do right now. They're trying to normalize a hate that should never be accepted. It could seem like they're using the COVID-19 not to recover from a disease from the disease of the virus, but instead they're using this crisis as an opportunity for them to blame the Muslims. And I have to remind you that we have to accept the fact that a huge percent of the population of India their lives are in poverty. We have to take into account that the economic situation of India doesn't help those who are vulnerable. And we have to admit that there is a huge gap between the different quality of lives in different social classes. I mean that among the population there is a true lack of education because of the poverty. And that's mostly because of this lack of education and this poverty, that people tend to believe anything. That's a consequence of despair. This way of building hatred is a way for certain people to feel better than others. They say maybe to themselves, I'm a Hindu, why a Muslim can have this? I should have this because I'm a Hindu, I deserve better. And leaders, they understood the fact that their followers they are not having the best quality of life they could have, and they understood that it's a way to attract them. So we have to keep in mind that this crisis reveals the needs of the population and that it reveals too his weaknesses. And because of everything I said before, I think that the international community should be aware that Muslims are discriminated and that there is a need for international reaction to push the Indian government to stop this hate. Yes, of course, COVID-19 is the priority, but it would be a huge mistake to completely forget the millions of Muslims being abused every day just because of their religion. Because we have to keep in mind how easily hate between communities can get worse and how easily it can lead to a civil conflict. We have to stop this, and nobody wants that. Nobody wants a civil war. If the decision of the international community is being passive, and letting the Muslim community being abused, that's a mistake. Doing nothing is a danger for the peace to be. The international community has to prevent this kind of reaction tending to genocide. To maintain the peace of one of the largest countries in the world, there must be pressures and there must be preventive actions to be taken by the international community. And we have to admit that all those red flags, they are red flags, look like the early stages of a genocide. And I don't think that the international community would like to be responsible of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Noor, for your input and very informative intervention, especially emphasizing on how the human emotion hate isn't built in just one day. It is created over a long period of time, and that the foundation of hate can be derived from the human emotion fear, which manifests over time into something greater, playing a part in discrimination, propaganda, and animosity. And like us all, as you mentioned, we believe it is time for the international community to take part in turning things around. We will now move on to our next speaker, Ms. Hina Yuno. You may have the floor.
Thank you so much for providing me this opportunity today to speak up. Thank you so much, Sonia. You have highlighted the main things that happened during this whole pandemic and during the COVID-19 situation. And I think national and international media has seen, and the world has seen, how communities, the minorities, especially in India, have been discriminated, traumatized during that whole situation. So first of all, I want to say here, because of some technical issues, I'm not able to leave the camera on. Because I think you wouldn't be able to listen to me at that time. The voice going to be distorted. So if it's okay, can we continue?
Yes, you can continue. Yeah.
All right, great. Thank you so much. We have seen this, the recent polarization in India has been supplemented by an assertive religiosity of Muslims who comprise almost 14% of the population. And here religion becomes a defining marker of Muslims. Why I'm saying this thing is because we need to, because I would try to make this thing clear that during the COVID-19 pandemic, this whole situation, this whole discrimination in India has been rising to that level, that this particular minority has been traumatized, has been targeted, and that they have been, and it's been raised on numerous occasions in the United Nations at different levels. Religion becomes a defining marker of Muslims who, as a community, is marked by internal and at a time of conflicting differences. We have seen, if we go back in February 2020, where this whole thing started, when a small group of Muslims who came together for a religious congregation at New Delhi, this whole misconstructed, they misconstructed into a conspiracy theory. They have been accused of coronavirus jihad, and as such was reprimanded for spreading the highly contagious diseases amongst the Indians. That's a discrimination, a religious discrimination for that particular minority, that they are spreading this as their so-called jihad. As media continues pressing that those particular group has risen that coronavirus cases in India up to 30%, the entire focus was shifted on criminalizing potentially sick persons. So we have seen in last 1 year that how media and around their own journalism in India, how they emphasize so much on the religious identity of infected person, that it created an atmosphere of stigma and fear and discouraged many people from disclosing their travel histories and thereby aggregating the contagion further. So this diversion and this diverted history and these all things led to the situation gotten more worse. In March 2020, within days, such networks of disinformation had led to entrenched rumors that Muslims were intentionally infecting Hindus through a range of behaviors. As a result, several spaces, residential settlements, hospitals, for instances, illegally and unconstitutionally denied entry and services to some Muslims, resulting in further unnecessary deaths. And in a parallel move, and implicitly supporting the BJP MLAs and supporters who were pushing the initial disinformation, the government of India banned 2,550 individuals from entering India for a period of 10 years. All of them were that they were affiliated with that particular group that they have used as a conspiracy theory against the Muslim minority in India. Meanwhile, a more public and systematic disinformation campaign emanates from mainstream institutions. For instance, a civil society institution composed of ex-judges with ties to diaspora Hindutva group. Recently, they submitted that claimed to identify the instigators of the Delhi program that took place back in February 2020 and left 39 Muslims dead at the hands of Hindus for right moves. And this report, which consists almost entirely of ideological fabrication, recast Muslims descendants protesting against discriminatory citizenship law. And we all know that when this new government, the BJP government that's been elected back in 2019, Muslims in India have been increasingly at risk since this Hindu nationalist Bharatiya Janata Party government led by the Prime Minister Narendra Modi was first elected in 2014. And we have seen so many different instances that happened, and mainly of that was on December 12, the Modi administration achieved passage of the Discriminatory Citizenship Act. And that has created a lot of bias, and a lot of riots started happening in New Delhi and different parts of India where people stood together that the people who live there, their generations are there, but their right of being a citizen of India, that's been removed. And that, I think I would say, that increased that part, that how Muslim minorities have been targeted during all this time. Coming back to the point, if we say that we have seen their mainstream media and we have seen their programs that's been broadcasted on their Republic TVs, their anchors were shouting on March 31st saying that these particular group of Muslims and these minorities, these are the dangerous people. They have labeled them, they have discriminated them, and they've said this thing quite clearly on on their broadcasting channels, that these are dangerous people and these lockdown cheaters, and they should be punished, and they have compromised us all. One official from Modi's Bharatiya Janata Party suggested that these particular people should be shot. So it means the right to live in India has been compromised. And it's often accompanied by videos purportedly showing Muslims spitting on food and sneezing, and the BJP RSS campaign of producing hate, initiating violence against Muslims in India runs as well as oiled machines that has internal complexity and leaves the ruling party with plenty of scope for plausible deniability when the supporter resort to murder. We have seen a lot of violent incidents happen. I think I would bring up one 22-year-old man. His name was Mehboob Ali. He has been beaten by a group of people, and he's been dragged into the field and has been hit by the stakes. Ali was a Muslim, and he was a Muslim. He was just returned back from that particular group that happened back in February 2020. And why this thing happened to him? It was just because he belongs to a minority, and it's been labeled that they are one of those people that's spreading this coronavirus and they're spreading this kind of contagious disease across Hindus. And that's kind of hatred that's increasing. And it's mainly just because of a lot of misinformation using different social media platforms, using their national broadcasting channels, and how this discrimination happened. We have seen so far that instead of bringing these points instead of bringing this thing to the point that whether they are in minorities, they are citizens of India. We have seen how Muslim minority in Indian administrated Kashmir, their rights been revoked since 2000, that government came into being. This situation got so bad in quite a few weeks that it prompted Equality Labs, US-based South Asian human rights organization researching Islamophobic hate speech, to release a statement urging the World Health Organization to issue further guidelines against COVID-19, because it's a pandemic, it's a contagious disease that struck the whole world, whole globe. So there is no one specifically responsible of spreading that hate and spreading that virus. We have seen the hijacking of coronavirus as an excuse of discrimination comes after a growing state-sponsored campaign to turn Muslim into a second-class citizens in India as a part of the BJP agenda of Hindu nationalism. Attack on Muslims have become commonplace, and the recent Citizenship Membership Act passed by the BJP in December prompts millions to take to the street in protest, saying it's discriminated against Muslims. We have seen posters starting that said that Muslims were no longer allowed in certain neighborhoods. No Muslim traders will be allowed access to our hometowns until the coronavirus is completely gone. Their businesses have been shut down. They have been jailed and imprisoned in their houses. And what happened, that how they took advantage of that one, that the basic necessities that were already limited to Muslim minorities have been completely shut down during all this period of time. So I think this is the time where we need to emphasize this fact that this thing should be condemned, not on this basis that we're going to raise our voice against it. We have to raise this on different international platform, that basic human rights, whether they are minority there or whether it's in India or in different part of the country, should be addressed on different platforms. And these kind of inhuman acts and violence and discrimination, whether it's religious, whether it's a race or anything, should be condemned everywhere. And we, I think, going to condemn it on each and every platform. Thank you so much.
You have a great intervention. We can all agree that the COVID-19 has caused many problems across the world. It has created fear, worry, and as we are human, we look somewhere to find the blame as quickly as possible, thus creating disinformation, and in the case of India, isolating and targeting whole ethnic groups. And with media, it has become easy to manipulate others using fear for social and political gain. I believe we can all agree that any crimes against these groups or just against humanity should be condemned. And now I would like to present our final speaker, Dr. Feroz Messenger. Apologies. You have the floor.
Thank you, Megan. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Good morning to those in the UK and in the US. Thank you for inviting me for this very important topic, which affects not only India, the Southeast Asia, as well as the whole of the world, purely because there are second cause reactions to whatever is happening within a larger nation like India. As we all know, India is the largest democracy that we know of. Obviously, it was founded on principles of pluralism as well as equality within the political system. That's what made India what it is today, to bring it to the largest democracy in the world. However, as we know, India is diverse. The majority religion is Hinduism, is almost 1 billion, about 960 million. And the second largest religion is Islam, almost about 170 million. The main diversity within India, especially within the Hindu nation, is of course the castes. And obviously out of the caste separation, Dalits form the largest caste, which is about 200 million. Now, it's important to understand what Hindutva is and why it is a problem today. So let's just go back to when it was defined. Hindutva itself is like, it is more of a literal differentiation to elicit the belonging of a nation to a part of geography. So initially it was described as the people of the Hinduland. And obviously it had very close affiliation to the religion of Hinduism. But it's not the same, it's not synonymous with Hinduism, because Hinduism is actually a religion. So in 1923, obviously you must have heard of V.D. Savarkar, who came out with the ideology that India should be a land for people of Hindu origin. And he mainly indicated at the beginning of his speeches, he's actually indicated it is a land of people with a religious ideology. But later in his speeches, he came out with the ideology, slightly evolved ideology, that it's not just the Hindus, it's actually those who actually belong to that land. But they have continuously excluded certain religions as they regard them as the foreign religions, for example, Islam and Christianity. But that idea of Hindutva has evolved over a period of time, has started certain extremist ideologies to cleanse the land out of the non-Hindutva belonging groups. And that's when in 1925, the RSS was formed. And through RSS, which is effectively a militant paramilitary group which propagates the idea of Hindutva, there were other smaller arms of social reform, political influences, and all those subgroups were formed. All together, they were classed as Sangh Parivar. So they were the mother group which nurtured the idea of Hindutva, and then each group had its own agendas, RSS being the main political and military agendas, which again slowly formed the correct BJP, with the current ruling party. Now, I'll just give a slight idea about what was the background for Hindutva to form. And now it's important we understand how a minority idea within the majorities of India has slowly propagated into a majoritarian idea. It's very important we understand the evolution of Hindutva for us to understand why such a pronounced democratic country has actually plunged into a main array of racism, sectarianism, and also the problems with terrorism. And it has come to such an extent of as though there is state terrorism. This is what's very, very important we understand where the evolution is. Now, as we mentioned, so there's the Sangh Parivar, which actually harbors the mother idea of Hindutva. There are different extremes in that idea. One of the physical form of the Hindutva, propagation of Hindutva into the functionality of the country went in two forms. Number one is the BJP, which is the political arm, and of course the RSS, which is more of a paramilitary arm. So if you look at the evolution of BJP, obviously initially they were struggling to even get acknowledgement within the political society, but they gradually made their way into the local politics, slowly made their way into the national politics, and of course today for the second term they are running as the ruling party. Now, the fundamental basis on this is had to be nurtured on something which is globally accepted as a concern. And that's why you would find Islam has been attacked, Muslims been attacked on many fronts in the campaign of the of BJPs, as well as most of the Hindutva-based communities and an organization, because that's something, it's a common enemy. So because of Muslims, you got Christians, and you got Dalits, the untouchables. They do try to propagate the idea of majoritism on the basis of the common enemies. And that's why you will find that when they have, when the BJP acquired less seats within their local parliaments and of course the national parliament, you can find that they had become more and more vocal about the anti-minoritarian slogans, because that fueled the idea of the Hindu nationalism. Now, I just want to move forward with regards to how does it affect locally. We have heard few examples of targeted riots, which is either sponsored or protected, given protection even from the government in terms of carrying out the violence, and also given protection to the rioters, but also how it affected particular group of people, for example, Muslims. So this happens on a daily basis. There are riots, there are organized riots, there are rallies, there are vigilantes going on, rampaging, small villages, small communities, the communities who live in harmony, where the Hindus and the Christians and the Jains and the Muslims, everybody live in harmony, but they do have influences from outside who come in and then who violates their harmony. One of the most notorious thing was what happened within the JNU, the university. There were the power of the union was gradually taken over by the BJP supporting parties, and also the violence started, and then gradually the outside rioters were let in by some of the members of the unions, and then they were supported by the forces from outside guarding them. So the concern here is the organized violence, organized terrorism unleashed upon the innocent citizens of India, and then they were underplayed in the media so that the people who create these violences and rampages are protected and encouraged. So it is empowerment of terrorism within the country in the name of nationalism. And this is really worrying, because that has traveled, that has made the idea travel beyond boundaries. And now it seems that there are more influences supporting the idea of Hindutva across the globe. Now we are talking about regional politics as well as the global politics. There were numerous incidences where the locals, obviously, those members of Hindutva who are either dual nationals or the national of a Western country, mainly targeting Canada, US, Australia, Europe, and UK, of course. So there are infiltrations of the Hindutva supporters going into mainland politics, trying to gain support towards the ideology, or at least to tone down the influences the Western governments trying to make in terms of maintaining the human rights and the minority rights, as well as the rights of those general public. The concern is that why isn't the international bodies, the international community stepping in, addressing this extremism? This is the concern from the human rights perspective. Yes, there had been a massive campaign against Islamist militants. There are a lot of misnomers or propagations against Muslims as terrorists, regardless of the context or content. You look at the matters. Obviously, there is a need globally for us to fight against terrorism. It is undisputed. There is no questions about that. But that should spread across the globe towards any terrorism, whether it is a terrorism based on religion, It's a terrorism based on caste. It's a terrorism based on ethnicity or color. This is where the world has to step in. Looking at India, it's quite obvious. There are political leaders of the ruling party, as well as other parties who support Hindutva, come out in public chanting slogans against certain religious group or minority groups, and alienating them from the rest of the public, stripping them off through mechanisms which is very difficult to fight by for gaining people's nationality. You know, the CAA Acts, you know what happened in Kashmir with regards to removing their semi-autonomy. I think these are the parts. I'm not talking politically here. I'm talking from the perspective of human rights. It is important the world steps in to safeguard whatever the background of terrorism is, whether it is state-sponsored terrorism or guerrilla terrorism. Doesn't matter. What matters is the safeguarding of nations, safeguarding of minorities, safeguarding of peace-loving people against the violation just because of they belong to certain sects, certain religion, or certain ideology. And the government has developed such a, just purely talking about the protection perspective, in India, the government has a massive approach towards this impunity, towards people, the officials and people who are responsible of holding the law and peace in the areas of concern. And there is no, there's no legal prosecutions. There are even the cases which were taken into the court being dismissed, even with any weight of evidence you can produce. And also the worst is that you are made to feel as a citizen that you have no say, you have no electoral powers, you do not have no voting rights. And the worst is that your neighbor, who has been your best friend for decades and decades, has been made to think that you are a potential terrorist. So that comes through the media, that comes through the public change of public ideas, through persistent influences, throughout the social and political network. These things have to be addressed by the people of intellectual faith, people who have got the power to change policies, as well as the international community who can influence positive changes to improve the lives, the safety, and harmony of communities throughout the world. There are a lot of threats for India and its boundaries. There had been a lot of regional geopolitical changes happening. India doesn't have the time to destabilize a perfectly functioning democratic system with an expense of compromising their national security elsewhere. This is a negative move. This is a backward move of the country in terms of prepping it up post-COVID-19 to be able to go forward as a country. Unity is the power, and India has the biggest power out of being, it is a society with multiple religions and idea and talent. If this Hindutva nationalism, if the government or anybody with power let this dissect the country, it's very, very likely the country will go down. Thank you.
Thank you for your excellent intervention, Dr. Messenger. I found it most informative on how you mentioned the historical background of Hindutva and its definition, as well as how gradually it evolved into something more extreme and how it affects and impacted people today, and how it is crucial for the world and the international community to step in and remind the state and its people on the respect of human rights, and more importantly, on accepting the differences in individuals. So that concludes the intervention of our three guest speakers. I would like a moment to consider one of our spectators who asked a question in our discussion box. It's anonymous. So the question is, if the Muslim community is helping India now after knowing everything that's happened in Kashmir as well as other issues, what about Indians now? Should they not do the same in aiding? Who would like to answer the question?
Can I take the floor?
You may, go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, absolutely. But when you talk about humanity, it's not whether they are Muslims helping Hindus or Christians helping Muslims or Hindus. It's about nations. It's about humanity helping humanity. So yes, absolutely. From an argument perspective, if the Muslims helping, if I am helping my neighbor should be helping me. So that is the general consensus which anybody should follow. However, we need to understand Hindutva, especially the current ruling party, has got a different agenda. So it's not about what is being done now. It's about what is in their plan. I'm just not talking India as a nation. I'm talking about a political party with its own agenda with Hindutva in its heart. This is what I'm talking about. However, you must have heard that the Saudi government actually supplied tons of oxygens. This is through media, which I have actually seen, was actually given out for supplying the COVID-19 victims in India. And then what happened is, even with the transport agent or the big buses which actually carries this oxygen, been named as a pro-BJP, pro-Hindutva organization helping the nation. So you can see the agenda is pretty profound. So there is, no matter what comes into the country, no matter what another religious group, another nation who is affiliated to a religious group, especially if I'm to talk about the Middle East, the Arab countries, the Muslim countries, they come and help. It would be within the agenda of the prominent Hindutva organizations and the government to underplay that positivity towards the other nations or the Muslims, just so that their mission is not changed. They do not let anything positive happens in terms of increasing the social cohesion, because of that is the main array of their electoral propagation. That's their motto. That is the thing which feeds the minds of people who are confused, the minds of people who has got an alternative agenda, people who has got a different motive to the not even the nationalism or patriotism. They got their own benefits in their mind, and they use this situation and the ideas to help a group who will help them. So the BJP or the entire Sangh Parivar will have their own agenda with the flyer of Hindutva or nationalism. But if you go deep down into the actual functioning elements of this organization, you'll find that there is always a different political agenda. So the short answer to your question is Muslim countries coming forward to help India will not be portrayed as Muslims are helping India. The most they will get out is this country has helped, and that's it. It will be made as pure political or diplomatic move rather than a positive move to increase cohesion. But it doesn't mean the countries shouldn't try. For example, Pakistan should try. Of course, they did. They did send oxygen. They sent ambulance. It's a fantastic move. It's one step forward to increase cohesion and improve stability within the geopolitical areas, and also increase the relationship between countries. Because this is something I've been saying for the last 35 years, that the survival of India and survival of Pakistan is depend on each other. And also the improvement, the future of the nations are dependent on their relationship. I know they vary on many grounds with regards to the boundaries and borders and things, but it is important these countries, these nations comes together on commonalities rather than differences. And that is the way how the minds and hearts of the illiterate people, the commoner, can be changed into thinking, no, pluralism is the way forward for a democracy. And these countries, more and more of those Muslim countries should come forward, because that may be an eye-opener for people to start thinking about, we were helped not because of we are Hindus, we are helped because we are human. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you, Dr. Messenger, for your response. I personally believe that the answer was answered, especially when it comes down to humanity. So now we are reaching the end of this informative webinar. But before we conclude, I would like to invite each of our panelists one more for any final remarks that they would like to mention. Ms. Noor.
What I would remind is that the international community is like closing their eyes on what is going on, and that there must be measures to be taken right now if we don't want to see a situation like a genocide to happen one day. And I think as soon as possible, the people of India and the international community need to pressure the Indian government. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Noor. Ms. Hina, do you have any final remarks?
I would agree with both panelists, and I would say, like, yeah, that's the time. But humanity should prevail everywhere. We have tried the initiatives to help, just disregarding the discrimination or race or anything, but initiatives should be taken, and they have been taken by different countries, regardless of religion or anything. But we have to look into this kind of things. That's not right for the peace in the world. To bring up the peace, we have to basically put a prioritizing thing on humanity. So we have to raise this issue on different platforms as well, to bring up the things so that we can, during this pandemic and the COVID-19 situation, because it's still continuing and still there are a lot of people getting affected. Not only in India, in different parts of the world as well. So each and every person should have this responsibility, being human, that we should take initiatives and we should do whatever in our capacity to build up these kind of initiatives to carry on.
Thank you, Ms. Hina, for your final remark. Dr. Messenger, what is your final remark for this session?
Thank you, Megan. My final regards are maybe three-fronted. One is countermeasures for the extremism of any religion has to be done. I know there's a lot of money, effort, intelligence being put into countermeasure Muslim extremism. There is a place for it in terms of the countermeasures, and it has to be done with the cooperation. And you know, and every country in the world, including the US, knows that you cannot just go and change people's mind. You need to bring people into a state of listening, and so you need to work with that community to be able to change their minds. So the same thing applies to India. There should be countermeasures engineered outside India and within India to increase awareness about the pluralism, the beauty of living together, respect for other religions and other castes, as well as have social media presence of these ideas, discussions, bring out figures in to discuss how to propagate pluralism, and all this have to be done. More effort, more intelligence, and more finances should be put into it. Not just within India, just outside India, especially from the Western world, because they need to understand India is a large part of the world map. It is important that India is stabilized, India is plural, and most important is that India stays democratic. It is very, very important. If India falls out of democracy, it's a massive failure to the world from the democratic nation. So it is very, very important the Western world invest on this in terms of increasing the awareness of pluralism and democracy, so that the Hindutva, the hatred which created by the Hindutva and the terrorism is broken down and beaten. The second thing is to fight back on the support it gets from outside. As I mentioned too, there is slow infiltration into Western governments, notably Canada, US, UK, Australia, so larger, more English-speaking countries. And it is important the government is more vigilant about it. And from the international counterterrorism measures, this also need to be taken into consideration as to how far the infiltration goes. Because the problem is, as you know, the one who causes harm is one, the one who watches the harm is done is another. And the one who has the power to stop it by any influence and international pressures is the Western governments and the governments who can influence policy change. And this is very, very important that the international society, the community, as well as the government, make an influence on changing policies positively. And the third and the last one is about disarming ideas that has a profound effect on human brain from a growth perspective. So one of the things the Sangh Parivar is doing is infiltrating religious institutions, academic institutions, schools, universities, to change history in the books. This is what they're doing. They're trying to change the relevance of, they try to increase or overplay the Hinduism within a geography, and to underplay the influence of positive change from Islam, Christianity, the Western invasion and things. It is important that people understand where we are, where India is today, is because of those positive changes, right? Yes, it has got a very rich culture. It has to retain. It has got a massive resource from all the four states, as well as human resources. It has got a lot of academic resources, and also it has got political resources. And it is important that country flourishes as a whole, rather than trying to feed out one element of that which will not be lasting forever. India has an influence on the world. For the world's survival and for world's progression towards a more brighter, more safer area to live in, India's security is very important. For that reason, investing on changing, disarming extremist ideas and hatred, that investment actually has to come from many fronts, especially from local activists, local plural organization, as well as the foreign organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Messenger, for your final remark. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank our distinguished panelists on behalf of UHRC for sharing their insights. I wish to thank our viewers for attending our event, engaging our cause for a freer and more just world. I also would like to thank our colleagues who contributed to making all this possible. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you all a good rest of your day.
Thank you for the time, everybody. Bye-bye.